What's going on, boys? Today we are talking a bit about cognitive functions and typology in general. Nothing super specific or in any way improving the theory, just thinking about them from different angles, adjusting that star map to look at the same things a different way. So we'll start with an observation. Typology is accessible magic. There are many similarities in the ways people look at and use typology and astrology if you look at them. Examples. Outsiders view both systems as nonsense. Nonsense that draws in stupid people to make them feel smart or give them a mote of an identity. And unfortunately, for quite a few people, that is true. That is what they are. However, in those same systems, there are people who are onto something, attuned with something, and are using these systems to great effect. The difference is that sect in astrology, they are few in number. But if you look for them, you will find a small group of people pondering the orbs, spinning the wheels, and are accomplishing some things that might surprise you if you find them, and can figure out how to communicate with them, which I can't because the few I've run into who really are in this shit are deranged. I can watch them yoink truths out of the ether, but if you try to get them to explain how they're doing it, or if you even try just to have a normal conversation with them, you feel like you're speaking with Doodlebob. Now, I bring that up for a few reasons. With astrology, there are huge masses of people who aren't even neophytes. And then there are a select few who are masters. In typology, those brackets are a lot different, and there are more brackets. With typology, you are going to encounter people who are not super high level, who are still managing to pull hat tricks with our system. And I think that's because, in contrast with other forms of magic, typology is accessible. It's the people's magic. There is almost no intentional esotericism involved. Typology, up to its highest points, is very straightforward. Now, that isn't to say mystical shit isn't happening. This is, in my opinion, not strictly scientific, even though I think there is a scientific method to the paranormal or the spiritual, whatever you want to call it. But you'll notice when learning cognitive functions, if you try to learn a function by isolating it, it feels like the whole system falls apart. And that's because each function comes with a series of pairs, each pair having different meaning, function, and significance. And once you start learning typology as these function dichotomies, working not as individual components, and not even as individual pairs, but all dichotomies together all at once, the more crazy shit starts happening. The more you can know, without knowing a person, what struggles they faced in their lives, or at least what sorts of struggles they faced in their lives, what things they want to hear, what things they want to do, how you can help them, really help them, if you want to, or hurt them if you need to. I'd put my typology against any other mage's magic out there, which my saying is going to get me cursed by another raving lunatic, but that doesn't matter. What matters is realizing you are participating in something that is not traditionally scientific. Now, I am sure if we did traditional scientific studies on typology, we would find some very interesting things, but my gut is telling me those are never going to happen for one reason or another. There's a reason I think magic or magics are mocked with such intensity. The blood ritualists and owl worshippers don't want you, the common man or woman, to know magic is a thing, and probably a pretty important thing. Another reason to understand this is while doctrine is useful, it's one of the reasons typology is as accessible as it is. At some point, you need to take your learning, your understanding, your investigating into your own hands. I think there's a lot of money to be made in popular typology in the same way there's a lot of money to be made in popular magic. A person doing skits and silly voices and making cartoons and digestible infographics is going to be successful the same way a dude with a goatee and hairy arms playing with cups and balls is. And while they have their places, sort of a gate and a net, they are equally as greasy to me. You don't need to do anything, but if you want to develop, you aren't going to develop listening to other people all the time, of any level. Also, another useful magical principle that came to mind just now that ties in well with typology, a good resonance going on. The idea that if you want to improve your magic and become more powerful or attuned to the universe or whatever it is, you need to open your mind and aware of other perspectives, aware of your own biases, and if possible, eliminating those biases to make your mind as open as possible. Now, that's difficult, and maybe you can't maintain it forever, but you can try. And I encourage you to do that because it will improve your typology, your magic. But ironic might be the word. I think it's ironic that typology was designed to be this system that helps people not become all the same thing, but be different, understand all our differences, and work better together because of those differences. Whereas typology, even at higher levels, is normally used as a division thing. And I am a division person, but not there. This is not a division tool, and it certainly isn't a division reason. Okay, this is a video about cognitive functions, and while it is a loose video on cognitive functions, we haven't even really talked about cognitive functions yet. So, some difficult to classify cognitive functions stuff I've been thinking about. TI is dark blue, NE is bright orange, SI is bright green, and FE is bright blue. TE is dark orange, NI is bright yellow, SE is dark green, and FI is a violet color. I have no idea where those colors came from, but it just hit me today. Whenever I think about cognitive functions, they are colored. Which reminds me of one of the earliest jokes I did on this channel. But anyway, because that would become a much larger Louis C.K. referencing ass tangent. Anyway, I think there are a ton of ways to describe the functions that work. As in, the NE and SI as a web and nodes of information connected by those webs works, but there are other ways to think of them that I think also work. One is by anthropomorphizing them a bit. Bear with me, and then we'll get into the other way. When I think of TI as an individual, it's always one of two images that I'm beginning to work out the meanings of. So the first image is of a well dressed vampire in a cell, hanging upside down with its eyes open. Always open, never blinking. The other image is of that same vampire, much worse dressed, kneeling over a pile of papers and other tidbits that have been torn up, examining them, putting them together where possible, and setting them aside. Again, eyes always open, never blinking. Very dark blue in hue. The next caricature is a disheveled, unshaven dude with an alt haircut, with a bomber jacket, a wife beater, a kilt, and a bunch of different earrings. He, of course, stands slumped over, bright orange. And then there is SI, a suit of armor with a sword, both hands on a sword, facing down. Nobody's in the armor. In fact, it never moves, but as time goes on, the world changes around it, and it moves by being stationary. It moves through time rather than through space. Never degrading, never breaking. Light green. Now, FE is difficult because I've never worked out a solid caricature in my mind of it. The closest I've come, and I'm not settled on it, is a physical replica of TI, except wearing sunglasses and trying to mimic the almost inhuman stillness of TI and failing. Bright blue. And what else is interesting is, for a number of these conscious functions, I had loose caricatures of them in my mind before realizing I was using them, in the exact order of the functions. TI sharpest, FE dullest, still. And what else is interesting is I can come up with caricatures for the other functions, but they don't fit because I would be inventing them, rather than realizing I already had them in place. I have ideas of what my shadow functions might look like, but I wasn't struck with them as starkly as, say, I was with TI. And TI's caricature bothers me a bit. It makes me a bit uncomfortable. Because despite what it looks like, I can look at TI in my mind's eye and know that is TI, but why is that TI? And I think I have figured it out a little bit. I'm sure there is more to figure out, but for now, this is the theory I'm working with. NI as a function makes me uncomfortable. And again, magic, of course, NI is the function in my critic spot. That's the function that makes me more consciously uncomfortable than any other function. Of course, running into SE or FI in a dark alley at night is going to horrify me, but NI is what I'm going to be staying up at night stressing about. And I think that image of TI is an answer to NI in an uncomfortable way. So NI comes with SE, and SE is very observant, and NI is very fast when it decides it's going to be fast. As in, if you were playing a cognitive functions based Total War game, SI is the function you use if you're playing for the late game. NI is the function you use if you're playing for an early game sweep. And I think NI and SE give me a lot of unconscious stress because I am worried someone is going to observe something I can't observe or don't know to observe, and then move faster than I can, even if I knew what was going on, to beat me at something and damage me in some way. And I think this image of TI that unsettles me and I didn't understand at first is my answer to that unconscious fear. My unconscious answer to that unconscious fear. TI is an undying, all-knowing absence. No matter what happens, if it can be done, then it can be understood. And you can't destroy understanding. You might destroy the person in front of you, but you can't destroy the fact someone either knows or will know how to know about your Achilles heel. You might feel brilliant and invulnerable for skipping steps, but you did skip steps. Those steps can be learned and taken. And because you skipped steps, you don't know how to find and take steps without that inspiration. You lack methodology, meaning you might feel like you are getting ahead, but what you're really doing is jumping down a dark path at night, not realizing something is following you, and it's going to get you. And I think that's why this image of TI bothers me, despite acting as sort of a safety totem. Someone, somewhere, knows, or can know, and there is nothing you can do about it. And I think that's why TI, despite being my dominant function, is something I use, not am. What I am, I feel, is more SI. That suit of armor that's standing there, moving through time as the world changes around it. Whereas TI, Cruelty Squad is a magical game, I'm realizing. We reference it too much not to be. I'm not putting it up there as a holy text. Maybe it's Apocrypha. I'm not sure. Anyway, in Cruelty Squad, there is a biological implant you can get called the Eye of Corporate Insight. And it's this demonic eye that gives you a leg up in the stock market. That's how it feels using TI. It's something you are looking through but aren't. And that's in part because this knowing is so not anything. It's not nothing, it's an absence of some kind. I think that's one of the reasons INFJs give me the creeps, because they are NI and TI is their tertiary function, meaning they enjoy spending time there. So they're these things that lead with a function I don't like, spending time and relaxing in a function that makes me uncomfortable. They're like living absences. But all this image talk leads us to the last image of an INTP's, or my functions at least, at work. At least in my life. one version of them. Again, there are tons, I think, that can explain a ton of images that can explain these functions and how they work, and they all work well in different ways. Any is a strange function because while it is an extroverted function, it is the hardest extroverted function to see. I mean, you can see it working, but it's hard to see in its own way. I mean, this is hard to explain. You know what SE looks like. You know what TE looks like. Through other people, you know what FE looks like. Now you can hear any, but it's hard to see any. And in my opinion, if you aren't using the webs and nodes model, there are two ways of describing any, but they both are a cloud. With any, you feel like you are, in your mind's eye, creating a cloud, and then physically, in the space you're occupying, also creating a cloud. And for me, because any is my auxiliary function, I it comes naturally to me, but I have to invoke it or evoke it for it to come out. But once it's out, it does two things. One, it allows you to cast your SI crystals onto it so you can view those sensations externally. Now, without any, you can shoot SI crystals directly into your veins and get yourself on a nice, hard, painful loop. But if you want to try to be a little bit healthier and less whirlpooly, you bring up this cloud in your mind and in your space, and then project your SI images, sensations onto it. And at the same time, it's not just serving as a space onto which you cast stuff, it's also collecting new information from whatever space, either physically or conceptually online or something, occupying. It's like a 3D combination blackboard vacuum. And once you've got this information, new and old, up, you use TI to slice them apart in 3D and figure them out, and create new crystals to file them away, or to pick up on new leads to look for new information. And again, it feels like you're doing this all in your head and totally in whatever physical space you're occupying at the same time. I'm not paying attention to my surroundings because I am focused on the information I'm working through, yet I can only do this in certain surroundings because the surroundings are very important to the efficiency or ease of this process. I can't just start doing it. I'm sure any DOMs can. I can't. And you'll notice FE isn't in that picture at all. I think it is, but I haven't worked out how it is yet. Because you might think FE is the thing that is explaining what's seen in this process, but it isn't. Remember, while your inferior function is often repressed and can feel like a weakness, it's often excluded from the process. It's not. If your inferior function were a shadow function, then it would be a shadow function, and it would be trying to ruin you somehow. Your inferior function isn't trying to ruin you, it's trying to help you in a confusing, ineffective way. But I think this description is a matter of quadrant. INTPs and ISFJs are the most in their own heads types there are, to the point they are interacting with the outside world from within their own minds, which leaves me feeling confused and lost about what ENTJs and ESFPs moment to moment brain spaces might look like. Do you have. I know you guys do spend a lot of time in your heads, or do you? I don't know. Or do you get into your head by interacting with the outside world the way we interact with the outside world from within our own heads? Another thing I haven't worked out. Anyway, cognitive functions are magic. Thinking about them in an academically magical way might get you better results, more robust results, faster than thinking about them other ways would. And there are tons of different ways to think about the functions. Picking up on patterns you are right now using that you know you're using, but you don't know you're using, and other things like that that will get you to a higher level once the popular or populist even accessible form of typology has gotten you as far as it can. You gotta get weird if you want power. Remember, it's not the wealthiest man, it's not the strongest man, it's not the most popular man who is the most powerful, it's the most imaginative. But that about rippity wraps this one up. I hope you enjoyed watching, because I certainly enjoyed making it. I went 4 days with no thoughts, head empty, and then a ton of things hit me all at once, and I want to talk about all of them, but I can't. Like if you enjoyed, it helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't, because we do this shit sometimes, and comment your thoughts, because I love hearing from you. You know the sorts of things I would ask about. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Really, we have a lot of fun on this channel. So much fun. In fact, you can imagine it as an interlocking system of parts, because foo-foo magic engineering is fun. And that's so much fun we have on this channel, and I look forward to doing this with you guys again in the future.